Hello, from South Lake Tahoe, California. I'm Senior Grandmaster Hemenes with Kajukenbo Live. What I'm going to do from now on Wednesdays, we're going to have a podcast video because there's too many questions being asked during the week, and I don't want to interrupt the interview on Saturday, the people that we're interviewing, because the people from all over the world, and I don't want to waste their time answering my questions when it's their airtime. So this is how we're going to do it. I have like three questions today. Uh, One is, where I first took karate from, um, how I met Grandmaster Gaylord, and my feelings towards him, and how the WWKA got started. And the first question is from Sifu Alex Shepard. He wanted to know where I first started. Well, when I first started, I was only a little young boy, and there was a studio in San Leandro. It was Luke's Haku Gun Fu, and Herbert Luke from Hawaii was the owner. And we were going by. My mom took me by there. I was only a little kid, and it was kind of trippy. It was right next door to a Taekwondo studio, and so you very seldom do you see two studios connected like that. But that's the way it was. But I always wanted to do the Gun Fu thing because of the Bruce Lee. I always wanted to be like Bruce Lee because he was like my idol when I was a little kid, like most people's. Anyway, long story short, on the pamphlet, it was $25 a month. I came home. Of course, my dad said no, he's not paying $25 a month. And that's back then. That's a lot of money. In the early, like 1970, I think it was. And so I was, crying like a baby. Oh, I want to karate, I want to karate. And my granny was there, and she said, "Son, you want to take karate?" And I went, "Yes." And she goes, "If I pay the $25, will you go?" And I went, "Of course." So my grandmother was the one that signed me up. So if it wasn't for her paying for that lessons, I don't know where I'd be at today. But long story short, I was there for about 2 years, and then sadly they had to close the studio down, and because the guy was going back to Hawaii and everything. And it was kind of heartbreaking for me because I was a little kid and I was there every day, and I learned all the forms and all the kung fu techniques and stuff. And so then after that, I said, well, I want to take another kung fu. So I found Brendan Lai out of San Francisco, Praying Mantis, and he had a studio in Hayward. So I remember going down to Hayward and training with him for about a year. And it just wasn't my cup of tea, the Praying Mantis. Nothing bad towards it. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I was looking for other things. And so when I left there, I always wanted to take karate from Vargas. Because at that time, Vargas and Bill Owens' studio was the best studios in the Bay Area. So, but he was more expensive. He was $35 a month. So my dad's all, no way, no way, no, you ain't paying $35 a month. That's ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, I want to go to karate. So he said no. And of course, like most moms, my mom snuck me over there and signed me up. And the lesson learned on this is the first day I went there, I wore my kung fu uniform. Well, most of you out there probably knew what happened after that. I walk in and I look like the lamb walking into the lion's den, and I thought to myself, wow, these guys are friendly. They're all smiling at me. They're all looking at me, smiling at me. And later on down the line, then I realized, you just don't do that, because later on I was one of the lions, licking my chops when the new guy came in. But long story short, I came home that night and my dad's all, holy shit, did you get into a fight? My eye was black, my lip was puffed up, I had scratches all over me, my ribs were cracked. This is the first night of my Kajukenbo training. So a lot of people would be all, hell with that, I quit because it's too hard. I was like, oh my God. Next day, bright and early, I'm there. Knock, 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 knock at the door. It's not even open yet. And I did this for years. I got there at 4 o'clock. He was always coming late, so later on he gave me a key, so I opened the door, and not being a kiss ass, but I used to vacuum the mat, and because of the lint, I didn't want it all over my uniform. It wasn't because of being a kiss ass. But so anyway, I'd work on the bag for until class started, and I'd do like 2 classes that night. And this went on for 6 years. And I met, I had no friends, just karate people. And that's when I met Grandmaster Jimmy Willis. He was a white belt just like I was, and we became really close friends. And to this day, it's been 45 years. We've been friends. Anyway, long story short, I stayed there until oh, and how and how the first time I was able to see Professor Gaylord was we had gone to Long Beach Internationals, and we went down there and we fought, and we were coming back home, and it was probably like midnight. We stopped at Denny's in Bakersfield, myself, Sifu Vargas, and all the students. Well, one of the students, Wayne, he was kind of not out there, and he kind of acted up at the restaurant. But I'm not gonna be innocent. I was kind of teasing him, but he kind of like kind of wigged out, and so Vargas got mad at him and told him, Wayne, you need to go outside. So of course Wayne wouldn't do it, wouldn't listen to him. He's only a green belt, and told him to go take a hike, but I won't use the word he used. So we get in the van, and Sifu Vargas says, "I'll leave him." And I'm all, "Leave him?" I go, "We're in Bakersfield, and no one's around." He's all, "Leave him." I said, "Okay." So we drove off, and he left them there, and it took him like, I don't know how many hours to hitchhike home. Anyway, that's the first time he brought Professor Gaylord down to have a meeting because of what Wayne did. And I didn't get to talk to him. All I know is that he walked in, he was bigger than life. I heard all the horror stories. And, and just like, oh my God, that's Professor Gaylord. And, he went up there and he gave him his speech. And they made the kid shave his head bald, took his belt away. And later on, when his hair grew out, they gave him his belt back. Just that's the way they were done back then. They were just kind of did up the wall stuff. Anyway, long story short, so that's the only time I've ever seen him until years and years later. And me and Sifu Vargas, we had an outing, and he was mad at me over a silly argument. And he wanted to strip me from my black belt to a white belt, and for punishment, because it's dumb. Because I went out with one of the girls at the karate studio, and he told me not to, and I did anyway. And he got mad. So anyway, I told him no, he wasn't going to do that. So he said, "Well, then you're going to be Professor Gaylord's main dummy. You're going to go to Fremont and work with him, and he'll punch you every night." So I said, "Okay." So I left there, and I was pretty upset because myself and Grandmaster Willis, we were the only ones that were really representing him at the time at the tournaments, and we were doing so well. So I decided to open up my own studio. And that's what I did. Now, how I got to meet Professor Gaylord was I was at a tournament. It was at Reardon High School in San Francisco. And I competed, and I took grand champion and all that crap, Anyway, and he was there with the Juarez people. And actually, Ron Estella brought him over to me. And he said, Professor Gaylord wants to meet you. Well, I already known that Vargas had sent him a letter. So I thought, oh my God, he's going to yell at me. He's going to just like bite my head up. I didn't know what he was going to do. So he asked me, he goes, "Tell me what happened." So I told him the whole story. I won't use the word he used, but more or less, screw him. He goes, "I've been watching you. From now on, you're under me." He goes, "You come see me Monday in Fremont." And I was like, what a relief, because it's completely different than I thought he would be. So I went down there, and I sat with him for an hour or so, and we talked. And, so he said, "I want you under me." And at the time, I was a student black belt. And Vargas, that's what he gave me. And it was already been like 2 years since he gave me that belt. So then Professor Gaylord promoted me to a second degree black belt like the following week under him. So for the last 45 years, that's who I've been under, is Professor Gaylord. I know he's great Grandmaster Gaylord, but all the old timers, we just call him Professor. Yeah, that's just the way it is. Just like Sifu Al de Coscos, we call him Sifu Al, Anyway, so as time went by, me and him became pretty close. And we had different events. I'd always send a limousine to go pick him up and, just cater to him pretty good. But one thing he did, he would always have me do things for him. Like, for example, we had a black belt class once a month, and after class we had the Kajukenbo KA meeting. And he would tell me, "I want this said, that said, this said, but it's coming from you, not me." I said, "Okay." And he did the same thing, I think, with Brian Yoshi. Same thing with Brian for a while. And I said, okay. So, of course, when I would bring these things up in the meeting, I looked like the asshole because none of them did what I said, and they always just like blew me off, whatever. They're thinking I was just some, whatever, And I was like, okay. So he would do this and do this, like, and so, but I didn't care because I was loyal to him, and and I always was, because I was close to him. I loved him very much. He was my teacher, my friend, and like for example, I was in Reno one time, and I was a 3rd-degree black belt at the time, and C. Joe Imperato, we called him Professor back then too, says, "Hey Hemenes," he goes, "You want a Charlie, that blue belt?" And I was like, yes, Professor. And he's, "I'll tell you what, I've been watching you." He goes, "I want you under me." He goes, "From now on." He goes, "I'll tell you what." He goes, "You come under me today I'll make you 7th-degree black belt. But you're under me." And I looked at him with, out of respect, and I said, "Thank you, Professor, but no, I have to decline because I'm with Professor Gaylord. And I want to stay with Professor Gaylord." And Imperato's reaction to me was, "Psh!" in my face. And that's the last time I talked to Imperato. And it's, never talked to him ever since then. But I couldn't do that because I was loyal to Professor Gaylord. And also, I couldn't go from 3rd degree to 7th degree in front of my peers because I would make a complete fool out of myself. A lot of people would jump on that or would say, "Oh, well, he's the main guy. You should have done it." I couldn't do that. I just wasn't in me. I just could not do that. And to this day, I've never jumped rank with any other people. Sifu Vargas gave me my black belt. Gaylord gave me all my degrees until he passed. And then Senior Grandmaster Vargas and Sifu Altacoscos, Alan Reyes, Al Novak, they brought me up to Grandmaster. So I never veered off with somebody else. Anyway, so I stayed with him for years and years and years. And like, for example, when he got his 10th degree, I get the phone rings. And it's always the same thing. "Tony, Gaylord. Hey, Professor, how's it going? Make me 10th degree. Make it happen. You can do it." "Okay, Professor, no problem." So that's how he got his 10th degree. I went to all the heads of the KA people, and I said, "We need to bring him up because, he needs to be the main guy in the Gaylord method, and there has to be a 10th degree, and da-da-da-da." So we did, and all the heads of the association agreed that day to promote him, except for Jim Juarez. He was the only one that said no. And I was kind of surprised because he was his next in line to take over the KA. But he kind of got outvoted, so they promoted him anyway, and Jim Juarez gave him the belt. And so it all worked out in the long run. And so after that, for years, we'd go places, we hung out together. He wanted things done. I would take care of it. But then the reason I left, and it wasn't too much being mad at him. At the time, I had like 400 students. I got tired of the politics from the KA. Nothing was ever done. It was becoming a total joke. And then Professor started promoting a lot of people that didn't deserve to get promoted. And the ones that were there, they knew exactly what I'm talking about. And so I said to myself, well, I'm just going to step back. He's still my teacher. He'll always be my teacher. I'll always be loyal to him, but I'm just going to step back from the whole scene. So for that period of time, that's why we weren't talking at the time. It was because of that. And the only sad part is, unfortunately, he passed away, and I never got to say goodbye to him because, we were very close. And so that's one thing, in the future, you people out there, don't take that animosity or to that far, because you never know what the next day gives, and so then later on he was going to before he passed, he was going to Portugal a lot, and he promoted was Grandmaster Bruno now, but at the time he promoted Professor Bruno, 8th degree in KA into Kajukenbo. And then he had taken Frank Waller up there, and I got a phone call from now Grandmaster Bruno Rebello, and he had said, this is after Gaylord passed, and it's been about a year or so he passed, and he said, he goes, look, he goes, he had made Frank go for a walk, and he wanted to talk to me. He goes, he told me that you guys weren't talking, but he told me that he wants me, Grandmaster Hemenes, he goes, to take over the KEA. He goes, because he's the only one that will make it happen. He goes, you see to it that it happens, that he takes over the KEA. Well, when he told me this, it was quite touching, and I'm not going to lie, I shed a tear. Because, like I said, I was going to say goodbye to him. So I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to let his legacy this end. So I called up Ron Stellar, and he said the exact word to me. He said, Tony, he said, nobody wants the KAA. It's falling apart. No one's doing nothing. It's yours. If you want it, take it. Well, deep down inside, I didn't want the KAA because I wanted to do it myself, because I didn't want to have to go through the same politic crap that we went through for 37 years with them. So I had to do it right way. I called up the Gaylord girls. I talked to one of them, and I told them what their dad wanted. And she said, Tony, she said, put your application in because they're going to vote for president. So I did. And I said, okay. And I made my list of what my demands were going to be. And they were strict, and I wasn't at the meeting, of course. And so then, which I knew would happen, at the last minute, they put in Kelly Gaylord as the president. Which Kelly Gaylord, nothing towards her, but in 40 years, I've never seen her one time in black belt class or anything. And maybe at a picnic, so I was just like, okay. But I wasn't mad. I was happy because I already had the website set up for the WWKA. And as soon as they made her president, I launched the WWKA. Within 3.5 years, we're one of the largest associations, Kajukenbo associations in the world. We've got, I don't know how many countries under us. We've got thousands and thousands and thousands of students under us. And they don't wear Hemenes Kajukenbo logo. They wear Professor Gaylord's logo. You see Gaylord's name on every one of those people. You won't see my name. You won't see Grandmaster Laguerre's name on there. You see Gaylord's name on there because that was the whole point of the whole thing, was to do it for him. So I'm hoping that he's looking down and he's happy for what I'm doing so far. And so far we've done a great job. The thing is like when most people pass, everybody says, oh, he said that, he said this, he said that, he said that. I've got people on the Kajukenbo Cafe when that was around, people going, oh, I trained under Professor Gaylord for 30 years. And I'm on the line going, this guy is so full of it. I've never heard of him before. Oh, as I call him on it, I go, I never even heard of who you are. Oh, I'm from Oregon, and I kind of come down once in a while, and we talk and stuff like that. Oh, okay. So in other words, I call you like an outsider. You're not really a Gaylord black belt. You might be under Gaylord, but you're not really a Gaylord black belt like us old timers are. And so that's the problem that I had, was that everybody jumped in the bandwagon, and all these high ranking under Gaylord, and he did before he passed, started promoting a lot of people that shouldn't have been promoted. That was going to be under them, and he had done it. He only did it once before, and knowing something about Great Grandmaster Gaylord, when we were younger, you deserved your degrees. Myself, Brian Yoshi, Jim Williams, all those guys, we went for years, 5-6 years, without getting a degree. And then the first time he ever jumped everybody is the Juarez people brought in Melchor Chavez from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I think it was around 83 to 85, around there. And he was only a second-degree black belt. And at that time, we were third-degree black belts. And Gaylord promoted him to a 5th-degree black belt over all of us. And that was the first time that he kind of ruffled a lot of feathers with all of us, because he did that, because he's never done that before. I think he kind of stopped for a long time. He didn't do that. But towards the very last, probably the last 3 or 4 years of his life, he started promoting a lot of people that shouldn't have been promoted, you know, and that's the only sad part that came out of it. You know, so, but, you know, I guess in this days, everybody's been promoting everybody. It's kind of sad. But I look at it when somebody's with somebody, like we were with him for 45 years and all those years, you know, and we started with him, you know, we're his black belts. When I say an outsider, you can still be loyal to him. You can still be a good black belt, but you came from outside and came in to get promoted. You didn't start from the very beginning in every black belt class like we all did, you know. And in the first black belt class we ever had, there must have been about, I don't know, 30 of us, and that was the very first one. And he made us all put our belts on the rail, and because, you know, everybody had big egos, including me. Actually, mine was probably one of the biggest. And they made us put all our belts on the rail, and he tells everybody in class, he goes, now, he goes, you're all the same. Of course, we all beat the hell out of each other, you know. That's just the way it was. It was kind of crazy, psychopath back then at that time. And put it this way, it wound up from 40 of us to about 7 of us, because it got so violent. And then when he lightened up, and then he let the color belts come in later on, it just wasn't the same. But in the very beginning, it was pretty tough. He put one of my guys' heads right through the sheetrock, just missed the stud. Yeah, that's just the way he was. And he always had this big ring on his hand, like this one, and he'd go pow, and he'd punch everybody in the head. And after class, they'd come over, look to me, and they go, look at my face. And they got this big ring mark from Professor Gaylord on his face, you know. But that's just the way he was. I mean, he was a hell of a good teacher, and he loved all of his students, and he was loyal to all of his students, and so we were very lucky to have him. So I'm going to keep going with the Worldwide Kajukenbo Association and not stop until I have no choice. But like I said, and what the old KA has done in 37 years, 40 years, I passed it by quadruple it by in 3.5 years. You know, and that's exactly what Gaylord wanted, because he used to always say, Tony, he goes, you're the only one that has balls to speak up and tell the truth. He goes, you won't sugarcoat things. Because this is why you'll make it work. And that's exactly how we made it work, you know. But like I said, he's a good guy. I love the guy. And hopefully one day maybe I'll see him again. Anyway, from South Lake Tahoe, I'm Senior Grandmaster Hemenes from Kajukenbo Live. If you have any questions, you can email me at www.ka.com, or you can message me on my Facebook. My phone number's on there. And if you have any problem for what I said today, you can call up. If you have the balls, you can use my phone number. Call me up and we can talk about it. And again, we'll see you next Wednesday.